Good afternoon. This is Debra V. Wilson. I'm in England. It is Sunday, the 5th of May, 2019. It has been quite some time since I've done a podcast that I apologize for. The reason being is I've been working on a research proposal that is in the review stage, which I'm very happy to say. So I'm looking through it again and again and again before I take the next necessary steps, and hopeful that it will not be in vain. In the meantime, I thought I would do this podcast because whilst doing the research for my research proposal, which is, as always, about the national security model here in the United Kingdom, I happened to come across some research that is coming out of the University of Birmingham and Oxford University. It's called the Counter-Terrorism Review Project, and I'm going to include a link to the information. There's a particular article which caught my interest, and it's called the Counter-Terrorist State, and I'm going to read one section from this article that, again, I will provide the link for. 2. In it, we contextualize our analysis of counterterrorism review by arguing that the United Kingdom should now be understood as a counterterrorist state, by which we mean that counterterrorism is no longer exceptional or temporary in the UK, but is rather a permanent and pervasive part of the state's core operations and infrastructure, quote unquote. The article goes on, but that particular section is pertinent to me because, as I've mentioned before, I, for many years, engaged in activism in this country. So the activism started, and it was feminist-based, and has always remained ensconced in feminist ideology, because I am a feminist. But my activism started in what might be called traditional spaces for feminism, around specifically around the rights for personal safety in women. I think that's in access to jobs, opportunities. I think that's a fair assessment of my activism. And then post the invasion of Iraq, which came out of 9/11 out of the U.S., there was a surge here in the UK of Islamicist-based terrorism, and that the trajectory has only increased and has proven to be persistent. I didn't understand at the time what I was saying, but my activism changed to be best described as anti-fundamentalism, anti-terrorism-based activism, and looking at Britain's national security model. The reason I got involved in the activism is I was going from civil society spaces from one to the other, trying to understand how civil society emerged and why it was emerging in the way it did. I'm originally from Chicago, and it was completely different from anything I had seen in Chicago, and I didn't understand what I was seeing or why feminism and activism in general was emerging the way in which it was. So much of it seemed to be a response to the extremism and terrorism in the United Kingdom. But at that time, there simply wasn't a name for it. In recent years, counter-extremism, feminism, anti-fundamentalism, feminism, those names are now readily assigned to this particular type of activism. But many years ago, that was not the case. For me to see this research and this naming of what I believe Britain to be, the United Kingdom to be, a counter-terrorist state that is going from one campaign of addressing terrorism's threat to the homeland from one to the other, I think is accurate. And I think it also explains the emergence, the multi-complex emergence of activism in this country, which has always been extremely intense. I'm going to keep this podcast short because I'm still at the stage where I'm formulating things, and I'm quite frankly still in my head working on my research proposal, although it's at the review stage. But I want to go with this stream of consciousness for a couple of more minutes. What I have felt for many years in this country about this country is that we constantly talk about the symptoms. So the intensity of the activism here, and it's quite confrontational, and it's quite binary in its construct, and it's so multifaceted. All the protests, okay, and that take all manner of shapes and forms. The issue of the spy cops, what they call the spy cops. I think for me, I want to understand, and I'm seeking to understand, and I will at some point in the near future talk more about my research. But I'm perpetually questioning why what is happening here. Not only, I don't think it's enough. I think it's not enough to simply note it and constantly react to the emergences of these incidents, but to come away with a more nuanced, systemic understanding of what's happening here. One of the things I would say, and that I've mentioned before, is I'm a survivor of the Troubles. I lived in Dundalk, and that's in the Republic, and I spent a lot of time in the North. But Dundalk, even though it's in the Republic, got its fair share of exposure to the Troubles. I've got, because of Dundalk, experiences of what was a provisional IRA that no longer exists. I saw up close and personal the Irish response to the Troubles, the Irish national security model, as well as the British national security model. And again, focusing as I do on Britain, I was always curious, and I understand the legality of why the Troubles, although I disagree with it, I understand for the legality of why the Troubles was never declared what I believe it was a war. But more importantly, for the sake of this podcast, to me the Troubles is yet another example of the dynamic that exists in the UK, that these experiences that happen have labels that I don't think are necessarily reflective of how the people experience it. So legally, the Troubles were called a conflict, but I think it was experienced as a war by all parties. I would argue the paramilitary groups, as well as the state actors, as well as the civilians. And for me, which does touch on my research, then to go from that, and there's overlapping to extremism from Islamicists and terrorism, and then to add to that, extremism and terrorism from the far right. This is a war-weary, a conflict-weary country. And I think one of the things that has emerged from this conflict-weary country is this highly intense and combative activism, which I think that has produced, and I am not making judgments at this point, I'm seeking to be academically analytical about it, is a policing force that engaged in what is referred to the spy cop phenomenon. So I recommend you take a look at this. This counterterrorism review out of, again, University of Birmingham and Oxford. Read and come to your own conclusion. I didn't need much convincing. The thing this project has done for me is give a name to what I've been trying to define for the approximately 30 years I've been coming to this country. So now I feel and I believe I have a name. So it's not just wondering and questioning the emergences of things like activism from civil society, the extremism, the terrorism, but to see the continuum in the relational dynamics of all the above. So this is Debra V. Wilson. I will try to, again, resume my schedule of posting regularly my podcast. Can't promise I will. I'm rather looking forward to doing more things around my interest in national security modeling and the understanding and analysis of the ways in which terrorism, because that's what I look at, terrorism and the intersection between terrorism and activism from civil society, how that merges and touches and engages with the national security model and national security modeling here in the United Kingdom. This is Debra V. Wilson. Thank you.